How are you? How's everyone? All right, go team. Yeah, some warm-up act, right? Okay. We're going to be speaking about how to help improve, transform our communication with our children. Those of you not familiar with my style, I like to make it as interactive as practical. So as we move along, if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, anything is not clear, please feel free to ask. I don't mind. If you disagree with something I say, you'll be asked to leave, but that's okay. One of the reasons why I like speaking on this subject more than anything else is because, as I casually, professionally reach for my pen, which is under 30 microphone things here. One of the reasons why I like speaking on the subject is because, we haven't really done that much damage yet, in spite of what you may be thinking. And even if you pass the Parsha, at least you understand how your parents messed you up. So, there's a little bit of solace in that. When we talk about improving, transforming communication with the children, it's good to take a step back and appreciate that every child has their own sort of communication style, right? There are some kids who are naturally just more communicative, they're more chatty, they're more, they want to relate more. Others less so. Some are just not very talkative. The classification for those are called boys, by the way. They're just not that, chit-chatty, and that's okay. Because communication is not just about talking, it's about how you relate to your child. So, with that Hagdama in mind, we want to transform our relationship. Can I move around? Oh, I'm going to move around. Is that okay? We want to transform our relationship. It's important to appreciate that at every time in a home that's blessed with children, we recognize that there are times when things are just going wrong at the same time. You've got, this child needs your attention here, this one is crying, this one is screaming. Every family's got their own name for these times. Some families call it the witching hour, tantrum time. I know some men like to call it time to daven Marv. But when these things go on, the question is, how do you handle that? How do you relate to that in a way that optimizes the relationship rather than destroys it? So in short, here's the recipe, and that is as follows. Any child that grows up that's made to feel like a chore, made to feel like an obligation, made to feel like they're getting in the way of the parents' happiness will have a very hard time feeling good about themselves. The reason is because children are egocentric. By definition, we know adults like this as well, but children at least have an excuse. They are completely ego-oriented. Everything is about I, is about me. So if a parent communicates that the child is a hindrance, an obstacle, something that keeps the parent from enjoying their own lives, it's very hard for that child to develop any sense of self. And if the child doesn't have a sense of self, his or her ability to communicate is hindered. To put it concisely, a child that cannot express him or herself to her parent, when they get older, they won't be able to express themselves to themselves. A child who's not able to emote and express how they feel and talk about how they feel and just get shut down will have a very hard time being okay and expressing who they are, how they are, because they're not going to be able to trust themselves. Which leads us to the number one critical key in improving relationship, which, by the way, goes part and parcel with raising children who are emotionally healthy and solvent. Because children, again, being egocentric, their self is defined largely by the relationship with their parents. How I'm treated equals my self-worth. So then, when a child comes to you, your child comes to you with a complaint, with an issue, with a problem, our job as a parent is to make sure that we don't shut that communication down. Regardless of how inane, regardless of how ridiculous, regardless of how unnecessary you believe what they're saying is. For example, your child comes to you and says, I want to stay home from school for the next 3 days. Stop, you're being silly. That's a natural response. Rather than empathize and validate, we very often invalidate. Invalidate is when we tell somebody, we tell our child that what they feel isn't real. I don't know about you, but growing up, I heard plenty of times, so clearly can't mess with you too much, I'd like to think. It's like, I'm hungry. You can't possibly be hungry, you just ate. Really? Okay. How many times you kid? Granted, it can be used as a little bit of a maneuver sometimes to stay up a little bit later. But how would you like if your spouse said to you, "Oh, you can't be hungry, you just ate. I have to go to the bathroom." "No, you don't, you just went." Really? That's nice. Empathy is not sympathy. Empathy is your pain is my pain. Sympathy is about disconnection. Wow, stinks to be you. Somebody tells you a story and you're just like, ugh, I wish I didn't hear it. Now I just want to go back to my breakfast, read my paper without thinking about all the yucky stuff and stuff. That sympathy is disconnection. Empathy is your pain is my pain. When your child comes to you with something that is disturbing him or her, you have to communicate empathy. Now, the number one rule of empathy is that you can't interrupt the person, because once you interrupt the person, you've broken connection. So how then do you establish empathy with somebody without speaking? What do? You have to make sure that the entirety of your nonverbal echoes their emotions, their feelings. There's a guy in shul, by the way, who is so just sort of oppositional. And I'm trying, to sort of break through that wall. And he's telling me a story the other day. And he goes, "You know what? I'm going through this thing." And I said, "Wow." I said, "So-and-so, that sounds, really, really enthralling." And he goes, No, Dave, it wasn't enthralling. It was just exciting, I'm like, all right, sounds like enthralling. And he's telling me another story. I said, "Yeah, there's just," and he's going on. I go, "Wow, that sounds really difficult." He goes, No, it wasn't difficult. It was just hard, I'm like, this is really sounding a lot. There are some people who always want to disagree. They're very incongruent. Maybe you had a conversation with such a person, you're talking to them, and you tell them about something that's very, very important to you, and their emotions are so mismatched. It's like, "Yeah, so, I had the third heart attack," and so, "Oh, wow, heart attack, oh, it's awful." It's like, really? They're not really jiving. When your child comes to you, is expressing something that's on his or her mind, the pain, if it's pain, the joy, if it's pain, if it's joy has to be etched on your face so that they can see that you're really connecting. Nonverbals are so important because you're having a conversation with somebody. I want to tell you, whether it's with your child or spouse, whomever it is, here is a killer nonverbal. You're talking to somebody and they do one of these. What's your immediate response? Turned off? Defensive? I know all of you already had your arms crossed, so thinking, now what do I do? Lieberman just said, I'm not going to not cross them because he said not to. But when somebody crosses their arms, even though it may be comfortable, it sends the wrong nonverbal message. You want to make sure your posture is open, that you're listening, you're nodding, you're paying full attention. That's empathy. Empathy is not the latest Pinterest quote on the beauty of suffering. It's about letting your child know that whatever he or she is experiencing, you understand, you get. Validation is an extension of that. Validation means simply the following. I understand, based on your perspective, why you're in pain. It has nothing to do with right and wrong. Your child may come to you and say the most ridiculous thing. And rather than validate the child, we tell them, "You're being ridiculous." We minimize it. Or worse, we blame them. If you only want to listen to me in the first place, how lovely is that? You go speak to somebody who is your lifeline to your emotional health and express how you feel, and not only don't they validate it, they minimize or they'll blame you in the first place. I know you're thinking, "I can't believe I messed up my children." It's okay. Still hope. There's a saying in sales that people don't care what you know until they know that you care. Until your child recognizes that you understand that they're in pain, do not jump into solution mode. They come to you and they say, "Mommy, by the way," no problem, blah, 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 blah. It's like, you've got to allow for that connection, because here's the thing. If they want something, even if your answer is no, you have to hear your child out. And allow them the dignity of giving it thought. And by the way, when you tell your child, "Let me think about it," some of you are thinking it doesn't work because he knows I'm going to say no. That's because when you say, "Let me think about it," you always say no. So stop doing that. Sometimes say yes. Even if you want to say yes right away, let them know you want to think about it. You can't short-circuit the conversation. Because here's the thing. It almost doesn't matter whether or not you're able to do what the child wants, if there's something that he's asking of you. What matters is that he feels understood. I want to share with you a fascinating study that was done with 25,000 people who were convicted of a crime. Their punishments ranged, or sentences ranged from probation to 20 years to life. They asked them, how fair do you think the legal system is? Do you know that the answer was predicated only on one dominant factor? They were indigent people who needed a public defender, and they said that they felt that the legal system was fair, not on how long of a sentence they received, but how much time their public defender spent with them. If they felt heard, if they felt validated and not dismissed, they said it was fair. You almost don't have to do. It doesn't matter. You see, sometimes we think as parents that our relationship is injured when our child wants something we have to say no. It's only injured if they believe that you don't understand that they're in pain and you're saying no. And again, validation has nothing to do with right and wrong. Your child has a toy car whose, the door gets dented, and he comes crying to you. You can tell him it's a scratch, and what are you making a big deal about it for? You get a scratch in your car door and let someone tell that to you. You don't want to hear that. In the scheme of things, does it matter with his car? No. Does it matter with our car? No. We don't want to hear that. So just briefly, based on just this conversation, let's assume then your child comes to you and says, hey, can I have this cookie? It's 5 minutes before dinner. What's your response? What's your optimum response to enhance communication and transform the relationship, improve the relationship, rather than injure the relationship? What can you optimally do? Your child says, this is what I want. What do you do? Usually the men will say, go ask mommy. Let me think about it. Okay, fine. All right, dinner's, I want the cookie now. Class participation is half your grade. It is not. Oh, really? Yeah, it is nice that they're asking. Yes, we're going to get to that, by the way. Optimally speaking, you could say no. You could say maybe after dinner, which is, I guess the best alternative. But what about this? See, here's the thing. If you say eat it after dinner, but your child doesn't recognize that you know how good this cookie is. See, if he comes to you and says, can I have this cookie? And you look at that cookie and you say, and again, we're speaking about a cookie either literally or metaphorically. It could be anything. Wow, that kind of cookie. Oh, the ones with the fudge inside and the sprinkles. Oh, those are really, those are the best. He's like, yeah. You think, you know what? I could probably eat half a box of them. Now he's thinking he's got a partner, right? But you know what? Mommy just made us delicious dinner. I just made us. Why don't we do this? I'm going to take my half a box of cookies. I'll put them on my plate. You take your cookie by your plate. Let's enjoy it. See, as soon as your child recognizes that you know just how good those cookies are, the only reason you're saying no is because you have to. I got to tell you, it is so important to allow your child to talk. Even if what they're saying makes zero sense. One of my kids, maybe I think it was last year, his Rebbe came over to him, they were davening, and his shirt wasn't tucked in, and he said, tuck your shirt in. And my son said, well, it interferes with his kavana. Okay, he can't, okay, fine. Rebbe said, let me tell you something, it's great, this is a smart thing to say. Rebbe said, here's why you have to tuck your shirt in, for two reasons. One is, it's proper. You daven, you have to tuck your shirt in. Two is, you're not always going to agree with all of the rules in life. Doesn't mean you don't follow them. My son still wasn't, necessarily buying the argument. And he said, oh, you're Lieberman, yeah? Go talk to your father. So, my son comes back, and he says, this is what happened. Now, a normal, natural reaction could be, so tuck your shirt in, what's the big deal? Or, okay, fine, blah, 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 blah. This kid, I know, right, that wasn't going to satisfy him whatsoever. But I also didn't have the time and attention that I could give it. So your child comes to you, you cannot let that child feel that it's not relevant, it's not important, that he's not important. So here's what you say, is what I said. Sweetheart, I can see how important this is. I don't have the time and attention it deserves right now. Would it be okay if we spoke about this later? I did two important things there. Number one is, I didn't say it's not important, it's not a big deal, stop with the silliness. I said, this is so important. I just can't get, I'm limited right now because I'm doing something else. But I want to give this the attention it deserves, that you deserve. And then second, I put him in a position of power. I said, would it be okay? He said, sure. We sat down. After dinner, it was 45 minutes. I want to tell you, and not all my stories end well, by the way, I just tell you the ones that do. 45 minutes, and I didn't know what the conversation, here's what we ended up with. I said, you know what, let's try it for a week, tucking it in, and we'll see how it goes. That was the last I ever heard about it from him, ever. I keep on meaning to bring it up to him, but I'm like, nah, better not. That was it. Your child, we just want to feel heard. We don't want to feel run roughshod over. We don't want to feel like we're dismissed. It's not important. You go to somebody with something that's on your mind, and they give you one of these things. Stop! You're being silly. You're being ridiculous. You're making a big deal. Enough already. Really doesn't do a lot for the relationship. You got to allow your child to be heard. That's it. Let them express how they feel. It is so simple. And we talk about expressing, we talk about talking. We're not speaking about having your attention divided, multiplied by something else. Full-time attention means you're actually listening, talking to your child. Not checking your phone, not interrupting. I want to share something with you. I can't claim this myself. My brother told me this, and I have every reason to believe him because he's a tzaddik. It sounds self-serving because he happens to be my twin brother, but okay. Which he is, but fraternal, so I don't know. He said to me, it was mind-blowing. He said he can count on one hand the number of times he's answered the phone when he was with his kids. I was like, really? Wow. I can't come close to claim. Okay, fine, I have emergencies, blah, blah, blah. He's got stuff going on. Count on one hand the number of times. What message do you think that communicates to his kids who, believe in horror, are fantastic? There's nothing more important than you. That's communication. That's a relationship. You imagine having a conversation with a spouse or with somebody and their phone goes off and you just completely ignore it, you're absorbed in the conversation. You're like, wow, he's gone deaf. You'd feel so good. Now, what happens when it comes to criticism? Communicating to your child that they're doing something wrong is a potential friction point. And I want to share with you what I think is so transformative in terms of navigating that. To not only communicate what the child is doing wrong, but without injuring the relationship, to the contrary, improving it, enhancing it. And you can give me any example, and we'll show you exactly how it works, practically speaking. Because there are some kids who you criticize, they will viciously go into defense mode. Others will wither. They'll cry. They'll remove themselves either physically or emotionally. Here is how, first off, here's why criticism doesn't work. And we know it doesn't work because we keep doing it and we get the same result. You tell a child, whatever it is, you know what, I remember I was at a Shabbos table some time ago, and this woman in the house who was going on and on and on about this awful experience she had where she was trapped in the house with these little people that resembled her and her husband. You guys don't have them here, but there was a snow day. And she said she was going crazy. And I look over her kids, I look over at my kids, I look at my wife, and it's just like I'm boiling. And my wife looks at me and she says, David, don't try anything. Then she goes on and on. She goes, you know what, when the kids go on the school bus in the morning, my day begins. When the kids come home, my day is shot. I'm thinking, she's saying this out loud. My wife, again, she's like, David, this is why no one ever invites us back. Shay, nothing. But I was good. Criticism doesn't work for three fundamental psychological, spiritual reasons. Number one is this. And we know it doesn't work, by the way, from all experience. When somebody tells you you're doing that wrong, our first response is, oh. Not sure how you translate that. Whether it's a classroom or whether the child is doing something wrong, halachically, whatever it is, tell the child they're doing something wrong. Number one is they're mad at you. Number two is because the cognitive dissonance, which actually Rabbi Taub's father probably could explain well to you as well. Cognitive dissonance is when a person is holding two distinct ideas. They want to see themselves, for example, as a good person, that they're doing something is wrong. So there's two dissonant ideas. And they have to be connected somehow. They have to be bridged in order for us to move forward. Because how do I live with myself? If I want to see myself as a good person, I'm doing something that someone just told me is wrong. Just parenthetically, I tell you is that my wife is very encouraging for me to go to the doctor, which I have been to once when I was born, and then pretty much that was it. So I was, I says, wouldn't you cough for blood? Maybe, it's a warning sign, right, guys? So I tried, and I was like, the guy thing, right, guys? You know what I'm talking about. Who wants to go to the doctor? So the engine light went on my car. And I'm like, to my wife, I said, I got to make an appointment, She goes, let me get this straight. You're pretty much, not with coughing up blood, but I wasn't in great shape. You're not going to the doctor. The engine light comes on in your car, and you're taking it to the mechanic. How do you reconcile that? And she was right. So I canceled the appointment at the mechanic. That's how I live with the dissonance, by the way. So you tell your child they're doing something, mom is true story, doing something wrong. By the way, it's an amazing thing. You desensitize yourself. You ever get that yellow engine light? Year and a half, not a thing happened. Lease car, I don't know. The red is a problem, by the way. And the thing that says fuel, that's, trust me. So you tell your child doing something wrong. They justify why they're doing it. They explain it away to themselves and to you. I'm doing this because I'm tired, I'm doing this, blah, blah, blah. But inside, it creates shame, creates guilt, which are different, but we'll just lump them together for now. They feel less. So now they're upset with you because you pointed something out wrong. They're justifying, they're digging their heels in deeper for the behavior, and all the while subconsciously brewing with feeling more guilt and shame that they're doing something they shouldn't be doing. So they're now further behind the 8 ball. That's why criticism doesn't work. So, a young woman had said before about, well, at least the child told you that they're taking a cookie. Let's assume that little Chaim has a problem. Hope your son's name isn't Chaim. Has a problem with taking cookies from the cookie jar. When would be the typical time that we would give him a nice schmooze on the importance of emes and not taking cookies? When he's got his face covered in crumbs, and you say, Chaim, did you take a cookie? No. Sit him down. I want to tell you something. In order to be an Erlich Yid, do you know how important it is? The entire time Chaim is thinking, I hate you. I hate me. And I'm thinking of all the times I'm going to be getting this cookie when you're not looking. You have Chaim, don't you? Right? Ineffective. Never works. You can't shame somebody into doing something. Well, yes and no, but for children, not so simple. Rather, the time to optimize that message is when Chaim gets it right. When Chaim, for whatever reason, it can even be, Yom Kippur, so he didn't take the cookie. Or could he be because he's fleshek, or because he's full, or because he didn't see them. And you say, Chaim, I am so proud of you. He's thinking, me? For what? You sit him down and you pretend, if you need to, that he chose not to take the cookie. And how proud you are and how important emes. The entire time for that 15-minute schmooze, he is beaming. He feels better, and you're infusing him with a self-concept that says, I am somebody who is honest. And make no mistake, our self-concept is so easily reshaped. Someone says to you, for example, they come over to your house and they say, wow, it's amazing how beautiful you keep things. Even Erev Shabbos, there's such a calm here. The next time that person knocks on the door Erev Shabbos, you're going to make sure everything is perfect. Because that's the expectation that they have. You know when somebody says to you, your spouse, whomever it is, says, you know what, I can't believe you're doing this again. Why are you doing this? Blah, blah, blah. It doesn't motivate you to be better. We don't grow from somebody beating us up. Comes to ourselves. Not a talk on self-esteem, but I got to share with you, you want to grow yourself, it doesn't come from saying, I'm such an idiot. It comes from saying, you know what? I fell down. It's okay. You know, when we talk to ourselves, by the way, you may not realize it. If you ever listen to that voice, when you do something that's not right, it's never pleasant. You scream silently at yourself. There are enough other people to scream at you. You don't have to add to the fuel. But it's like, I can't believe what this. Why can't you talk to yourself compassionately? The same way you speak to a wounded child. Your child scrapes their knee. The child gets hurt. Oh my gosh. Why not talk to yourself about that? Different conversation. When you talk to your child, when you want to get them to do something right, when I criticize them, don't beat them up. By the way, just talking about scraping knees, you know how it's like, the child falls and they look up and they look at you, and if you're like, ah, they go, ah. If you're like, ah, they go, ah. My mother has a great thing, by the way. She does it with my kids, and she did it with me growing up. Kid falls, this, that. She'll go, oh, wow, it's a great trick. Really? Yeah. All right. Who knew? My brother also, once again, has a great thing with the kids. Kids pouring something, doing something bad, say, use two hands. How many times have you heard that? Use two hands. My brother says, that's a great idea. He goes, let me show you a neat trick. If you hold it like this, yeah, nice. What I do with my kids, I do with adults, I do with everybody. They're doing something that may need a little bit of dachacha, a little bit of gentle rebuke, but you don't have the opportunity to wait for that right time. Rather than come into it with a sense of hubris and arrogance, it's like, oh, you know what? I have been doing the same thing for the past 20 years. I was just in a shiur, and here's what I learned. So humbling. Take your ego out of it. And theirs doesn't engage. Just talking about expectations, I was on a flight with Spirit Airlines, whose slogan should be the airline you fly once. But we're flying, and we hit turbulence, as airplanes will. And the flight attendant did something I've never, ever seen, never hoped to see again, and still can't believe it. She straps herself down on the floor in between the seats. Right? I know, not a jump seat, but in between the seats. Like buckling, I go, really? You know when you hit turbulence and they're sitting there just pouring their Coke, you're like, oh, okay, fine. They know it's probably no big deal. When they start freaking out, people are going, what are you doing? She happened to be a shtickle off, so I guess that was the issue. But your children take the cue from you. Okay, Rabbi, I just want to be sensitive. We're wrapping up in a few more minutes? Or tell me. We have 10 minutes? Okay, great, amazing. Okay, by the way, any questions on this? Again, just to recap here, your child needs to feel as though the path to your happiness and the obstacle to it. Any child that grows up is made to feel like a chore, made to feel like an obligation, made to feel like they're getting in the way of your happiness, will have a very hard time feeling good about themselves. When it comes to criticizing, it's important to recognize that beating your child up, telling them that they're wrong. Certainly, I know everyone always says, you know what, it's the behavior, what you're doing is wrong, but you're a good kid. Okay, fine, fair enough. Even better, forget about criticism altogether. Just praise them when they're getting it right. And when they come to you, they're in pain, empathy, validation. Let them feel heard. Don't short-circuit the conversation. And the third leg in this is positivity. I want to share something with you that it's half embarrassing. Well, it's 90% embarrassing. So, but I'll share it with you because it is. I'm still floored by just the power of it. Long story short, I not a fan of phones or iPhones, any of that stuff. But okay, I downloaded a Boggle app because I was helping somebody with Word, Boggle, like the word find game, what I'm talking about. So helping someone with cognition and spelling and that kind of thing. So I downloaded it to my phone so I could play it with the person. And you get like the 3-4 letter words. It goes, good job, blah, 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 blah. So, all right, I had a few minutes. And I had the phone by myself. And the volume is on, and I'm cruising. 5-letter words, 6-letter words. Come on. Minor in English. And the app would say things like, every time you get a word with a little music, amazing, fantastic, I'm like, wow. And then, afterwards, whatever, I had the phone again, and I'm playing it, but the sound was off. And I'm playing it, I'm getting my 4 or 5 letter words, and I'm like, this is not fun. This is like, okay. Put the sound on. Put the volume up. Amazing! Terrific! I'm like, wow! Do I feel like a schmuck? But it was so powerful, and my kids now joke with me, because now the joke in the house is, the kid, anyone does anything, amazing! Fantastic! But it was so wild. It was just not fun without getting that. The most powerful ingredient in raising children who are emotionally solvent and with a communication that's positive and the relationship is enhanced is a sense of positivity and simcha. We don't realize just how negative we can be. By the way, hazard a guess is what the average praise to criticism ratio is. How many times do you think a child hears praise to criticism? 1 to what? 80 to 1? 80-20. Can't that be 40 over 10? Or can we reduce that further for me, please? There's a reason I went into psychology. 1 to 4. Thank you. But not bad. Ready for this? Thank you, sir. Research shows the average child hears 40 bits of criticism to 1 bit of praise. For every time, hey, nice job, it's, why are you doing that? How come this isn't that? By the way, when you ask your child, where are your shoes, is that a criticism, praise, or parv? Yeah. Well, if they were where they're supposed to be, you probably wouldn't be asking the question. They're not on his feet. We don't realize just how negative we are. Can you imagine a job and you're criticized 40 times? Unless it's the Department of Motor Vehicles, those are not very good odds. Nobody wants to hear a constant stream of no and negativity, which is why I encourage you. You don't have to say the word no, even if the message is no. You don't have to say the child is wrong. I'm speaking tomorrow on classroom management and on relationships with the children. And by the way, one of the great tools is to, no matter what the child says, there's never wrong. It's fantastic, great. Had I asked such and such, that would be the perfect answer. Kid feels great. What letter comes after Aleph? Gimel. Gimel's great. But the question what? Obviously, I'm reducing to something ridiculous, but your child wants me. Can I do this? No, 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 no. Hey, that's a fun idea. Tell me this. I want to share with you just a phenomenal way to navigate this. Your child comes to you with something completely, you can shout it out, the most insane thing either your child did or a neighbor's child, or just something, rather than just shut them down, or if someone says something ridiculous, a fantastic way to deal with that, with not invalidating the child and infusing with a sense of simcha, with joy, rather than not. I'll come up with something if you can't. All right, anyway, yes, no? Anyone out there? You do this because it's filmed, and so it's like, anyone in the back? Back. Yes. I'm sorry for those of you standing there. I've just, room is the room. Can't do anything about it. Gnavis Dawson progress. Child comes to you, says something, makes 0 sense. That's interesting. Tell me more. Works for adults, works for everything. No matter how ridiculous, no matter how... Yes, please. Question?
Okay, so when do you come and give them advice? Everything is like great, amazing. You hit all your friends in school today. You were mean to the teacher, with respect, amazing.
So far, I haven't heard a problem. So far, you're telling me so you're complimenting your kid, telling them they're doing great. It's the question, at what point do we have the opportunity to maybe correct the child's behavior? Right? Again, one doesn't contradict the other. Infuse the child with positivity, good. When it comes down, end of the day, by the way, there's sometimes you got to say, no, sweetheart, we can't have the cookie. Now, perfectly fine. Or, sweetheart, that's really not proper. It's okay. I'm talking about when you have the ability, the luxury, able to put it within a more productive framework, it's just going to allow for a healthier relationship and communication. It's just so valuable when you are more positive. You yourself. And by the way, when you have to criticize your child, you have to rebuke your child, it doesn't mean that you have to do it in a mean way. I've sent my kids to time out plenty of times with a hug and a kiss. Your voice doesn't have to be commensurate with what they've done wrong. Sweetheart, I'm sorry. Hey, I love you. I wish we could go ahead and do this right now, but that's really not what, proper. Let's go and do that. There's the ability to not break relationship with your child is so important. By the way, I started by saying about that some kids are more communicative than others, and others less so. When you have a child, for example, who's not very communicative, one of the mistakes parents make is that the child will say something like, hey, how come this? And you'll just want to say, just either shut them down or tell them why they're wrong or just answer curtly or be sarcastic. It's a mistake time and again. A child who's not very communicative, no matter what they say, that's interesting. Tell me more. Let the child talk. And by the way, just another fantastic way to establish connection. When your child, it works for adults as well, doesn't make a difference. They start telling you a joke, even if it's a silly knock-knock joke, which, sometimes they just go nowhere for smaller kids. You let out, actually I was in shul yesterday. I'm shul every day, but this yesterday is when the story happened. I happened to be in shul yesterday. I joked with my son, we were in Eretz Yisrael, we came back Tuesday, and I said to my other son, he goes, where'd you daven this? And I said, you know what, I wanted to make sure we really went to the Mahadrim, we went to the Beis. So I went to a shul and I said, Mishra, do you guys daven here 3 times a day? He goes, oh, no, we daven here 5 times a day. I go, this is my place. They rolled out the carpet for us. Okay. Where was I? I was making a really good point. Anyone? Oh, yeah, right. Thank you. By the way, I was in South Africa, 5,000 people, audience, like a ding-dong. I take questions, and then I got distracted. So I go, where was I? 5,000 people go, I'm just making sure you guys know. Okay, come on. Very good. Extra credit. When a child tells you a joke, tells you a story, please, I encourage you, don't jump in. As I was in shul, as I mentioned, I was in shul, happened to be in shul, whatever day it was, time to daven. And the rabbi came over and he said, Reb David, I don't know if you heard this. Let me tell you a story. I've heard it 5,000 times. When I walk in the shul, I've got good story. 5,000 times. I didn't interrupt him and say, yeah, I've heard it 1,000. I listened to it, and he told it nicely. And I, as authentically and genuinely as I could, I said, wow, that's a more, whatever. It would have been so easy to say, oh, yeah, but go to the punchline like people do with us all the time. And you're sort of like, oh. Or you ever tell a joke to someone and say, no, you told it wrong. Really? Why? Because you heard it one way the first time? I got it wrong? Don't jump in. Don't short-circuit the conversation. Why is a child telling you a joke, by the way, in the first place? What's the one reason, the only reason? Right? They want to give something to you. So you're pretty much taking and saying no. Are you married, sir? Okay. Case dismissed. I understand you're not being generous. As the Ramchal will explain, we're in shul, so I can bring in a little Torah here. The Ramchal will explain the external awakens the internal. The ability to present yourself in a certain way will help manifest it internally. So I encourage you to recognize, even if you don't fully embrace it authentically 100%, it behooves us to try to display that, and we will come to, as the Ramchal teaches us, to own it ourselves. But you will not come to own it by dismissing it. And by the way, authenticity has layers to it. The fact that you heard the joke before doesn't mean you can't appreciate the fact your child is taking the time to connect with you, to talk to you. That you can have in mind when you listen to it and enjoy it. But in much the same way, if you have one of those kids, and by the way, I encourage you, if you've got one of those kids, hypothetically a teenager who doesn't like helping around the house, hypothetical time, or whomever it is. Some kids are more helpful than others. When that child offers to do something, whatever it is, even if you don't need it, whatever, you want this, thank you, I so appreciate that. And you go over afterwards, by the way, I really appreciate it. Any opportunity that child has a chance, by the way, to give to you, to connect with you, you take it. And you embrace it, and you acknowledge it. So yes, I would encourage you, child tells you whatever it is, certainly authenticity is valuable. Of course you're right. The question, though, is in much the same way that the Torah allows for a degree of reorienting the truth for shalom, right? We know that peace trumps. Also relationship, allowing the larger picture to come through. I would encourage you to recognize that there are some things that we might be able to reorient in order to accomplish that larger objective. But your point is a nice one, notwithstanding. Okay, any other questions before we wrap up? Okay. So, yes, please.
There's all great points, and very much agree with it. But
The butt's coming. Yeah.
But what if you screw up? What if you come home tired and you scream at your kid, you would hit them, whatever?
You guys married? Okay. The very good question is, let's say that you mess up. You come home and you scream at your kids, whatever. Great question, by the way, because I'm inclined to think that we're human beings, and you know what? Not me, but you may lose it sometimes. I wrote a book on anger, by the way, recently, called Never Get Angry Again, which my children constantly bring up to me. By the way, I know I speak very quickly. There's if you're not familiar with the resources, Torah Anytime. Do you know TorahAnytime.com? I've had 100 different talks on dealing with all these types of things. If you go to it, put my name into the searchy thing, you'll find Torah Anytime, an amazing website, different shirim from Rebbeim and thought leaders. The very good question is, what if you mess up and you lose your temper, blah, blah, blah. Human being, fine. Here's exactly what you do. First off is, stop doing it. Second is, it's a perfect opportunity to show your child exactly what the responsible thing is. When you calm yourself down, when you recollect yourself, when you come back to your senses, you approach your child as follows. So-and-so, Tati owes you an apology. Do you have a few minutes now? Put the child in a position of power. Don't do one of these things like, you know what, you feel bad, so sit down, we got to talk. What I did was wrong. It was a mistake. I'm a human being. You know what's going on at work, by the way? And then you just blah, 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 blah. Right? And he's thinking, this is worse than getting yelled at. Okay? You say, you know what? I bet it's a great second. I owe you an apology. That's how you start. Great thing for Shalom Bias too, and the hypothetically measure. Is now a good time for us to sit and schmooze for a few minutes? And you go ahead and tell your child, say, you know what? I'm so sorry. You apologize sincerely, directly, honestly, ask for forgiveness, and that is how you teach your child. By the way, we didn't get into this, but just in terms of modeling behavior. One of the things my kids know that I find challenging is when I ask them to do something and I get something like, I'll try, maybe, bli netter. No. I said, when a child asks me to do something, my wife asks me to do something, my knee-jerk response is, if I can do it, is, sure, you can count on me. I'll take care of it. Can you imagine asking your children to do something and they said, sure, I'll take care of it? The only way that's going to happen is when they ask you for something and you don't say, maybe we'll see bli netter. That means if you're in the mood, the stars line up. And my children will say to me, maybe I'll try. I say, sweetheart, when you ask me for something, what is my response? Sure, I'll take care of it. You can count on me. And then you hear it from your child. It's like, wow, that's a mensch. It comes from modeling. You make a mistake, you apologize. You want them to behave a certain way, you show them what it looks like in real life. It's okay. You're a human being. I got yelled at plenty and I turned out fantastic. Ish. Okay, with that, let me thank you for the opportunity to share these ideas. Let me thank Rabbi Goodman so much for organizing all this and all the hard work that goes into this. And thank you all for coming out, because I will tell you, by the way, all of the few empty seats here are from parents who don't love their children like you do. At the end of the day, heed the advice of Bubby, who said there are two things a parent can't take credit for: how their kids turn out and how their cholent turns out. you could still put all the ingredients in, do everything, do all the segulas, tefillah, tzedakah, do everything, and Hashem has other plans. So cut yourself some slack. Go easy on yourself. Do the right thing moving forward. Do the best you can. Hashem gave you these neshamas because He knows that you have what it takes to optimize their best. So believe in yourself. With that, I thank you for listening. Good night.